My name is Daniel, and back then I was a junior in high school. I never thought a simple detention would turn into the most terrifying night of my life. But that's exactly what happened on a chilly October evening when I found myself trapped in what I can only describe as a creepy school lockdown story. I remember it like it was yesterday. The sun had already set, casting long shadows across the empty hallways. I sat in room 203, mindlessly doodling in my notebook as I served my after-school detention. The clock ticked slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. Suddenly the intercom crackled to life, startling me out of my boredom. The principal's voice, usually calm and collected, now trembled with urgency. "Attention all staff and students. We are initiating an immediate lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." My heart began to race. I looked up at Mr. Johnson, my history teacher, who was supervising detention that evening. His face had gone pale. Without a word, he rushed to the door, fumbling with his keys. The lock clicked into place and he quickly flicked off the lights.
"Everyone, away from the windows," he whispered, ushering us to the far corner of the room. "Stay quiet." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My palms grew sweaty as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was there an intruder in the school? A shooter? My mind raced with terrifying possibilities.
Minutes passed, feeling like hours. The darkness seemed to press in on us from all sides. I strained my ears, listening for any sign of what might be happening outside our classroom. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoing down the hallway. They weren't the hurried steps of someone running to safety.
No, these were measured, almost casual, as if whoever or whatever was out there had all the time in the world. The footsteps grew closer. I held my breath, willing them to pass by our room, but they didn't. They stopped right outside our door. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then came a new sound, a soft scraping, like fingernails dragging across the wood of the door.
My whole body tensed. I wanted to run, to scream, but I was frozen in place. The door handle began to rattle, gently at first, then with increasing force. I could see Mr. Johnson's silhouette, his hand pressed firmly against the door, as if his strength alone could keep whatever was out there from getting in. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Whispers, faint, barely audible, but unmistakably there. They seemed to come from right outside the door, a hushed conversation in a language I couldn't understand. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for it all to be over. When I opened them again, I saw something that nearly made my heart stop. Through the narrow window slit in the door, I caught a glimpse of a dark figure. It wasn't the solid shape of a person, but something more ethereal, a shadow, darker than the darkness around it, hovering just beyond the glass. For a moment, our eyes met. I say eyes, but I saw no features, just an overwhelming sense of being watched,
observed, hunted. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the shadow vanished. The relief I felt was short-lived, because in the next instant, the most terrifying thing of all happened. The door, which I knew Mr. Johnson had locked, began to slowly creak open. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think. Every muscle in my body was paralyzed with fear.
The door inched wider, revealing nothing but inky blackness beyond. Just as I thought I might pass out from sheer terror, the emergency lights flickered on. The hallway outside was empty. No figure, no shadow, nothing. The principal's voice came over the intercom again, announcing the all clear. The lockdown was over, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As we filed out of the classroom, still shaken, I noticed something odd. The hallway floor was covered in a fine layer of dust, except for a single set of footprints leading away from our door. I ran as fast as I could, out of the school and into the parking lot where my mum was waiting, frantic with worry. As I climbed into the car, I glanced back at the school one last time, and that's when I heard it again. Footsteps, coming from inside the now empty building, following me. To this day, I can't explain what happened during that terrifying lockdown. Was it all in my imagination, fueled by fear and adrenaline? Or did something truly supernatural occur in those dark hallways? All I know is that every time I hear about a school lockdown, my mind races back to that night. The whispers, the shadow, the inexplicable opening door. It all comes flooding back. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear those footsteps echoing in the distance. This true, scary story has haunted me for years. The memory of that haunted school and the events of that terrifying lockdown are seared into my mind. I've searched for explanations, looked for similar creepy school lockdown stories, but nothing quite matches what I experienced. I've come to accept that some questions may never be answered, but one thing's for certain: I'll never look at an empty school hallway the same way again, because now I know that sometimes the most frightening things are the ones we can't explain, the ones that lurk in the shadows just beyond our understanding, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal themselves. So the next time you find yourself alone in a dark, quiet place, remember my story and listen carefully. Because you never know when those footsteps might start again, following you into the night. My name is Alex. Back then, I was a high school student at Westbrook High. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. That changed one cold November afternoon. I remember it vividly. The sky was grey, threatening rain. The halls were quiet as most students had gone home. I stayed late to finish a project in the computer lab. The intercom crackled to life. "Attention all staff and students, this is a lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." My heart raced. I'd never experienced a real lockdown before. The teacher quickly locked the door and turned off the lights. We huddled in silence, waiting. Minutes passed. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow. I could hear my own breathing too loud in the stillness. Something felt off. A whisper from across the room. "Did you hear that?" I strained my ears. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. They weren't the rushed steps of someone seeking safety. These were measured as if searching. My palms grew sweaty. The footsteps stopped outside our door. The handle jiggled once, twice. My breath caught in my throat. The door remained locked, but the presence lingered. I could feel eyes staring through the small window. Suddenly a shadow passed. The footsteps continued down the hall, fading away. Collective sighs of relief filled the room. But my unease grew. Time crawled by. The silence became oppressive. I needed to use the restroom desperately. After what felt like hours, the teacher reluctantly agreed to let me go. I crept into the hallway. Emergency lights cast long shadows. My footsteps echoed, too loud. I quickened my pace. The bathroom door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, it was pitch black. I fumbled for the light switch. Nothing. The power must be out. I used my phone's flashlight, casting a weak beam. As I washed my hands, a chill ran down my spine. In the mirror, I saw movement behind me. I whirled around, empty stalls, but I could have sworn. I shook it off, just nerves. Hurrying back, I heard it again. Footsteps, not mine. They were coming from the intersecting hallway ahead. I froze. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, dark, unnaturally still. It stood facing away from me, perfectly centered in the hallway. My heart pounded. I couldn't breathe. Slowly, so slowly, its head began to turn. I caught a glimpse of pale skin, hollow eyes. I ran. Blind panic propelled me forward. I slammed into the computer lab door, pounding frantically. The teacher let me in, confused by my terror. Minutes later, the all clear sounded. Police swept the building. They found nothing. No intruder, no explanation for the lockdown. I tried to tell them what I saw. They dismissed it as stress-induced hallucination, but I know what I experienced. Weeks passed. Life returned to normal. But late one night, working alone in that same computer lab, I heard it again. Footsteps in the hall. Slow, deliberate, searching. I don't stay late at school anymore. The halls feel different now, colder, as if something is always watching, waiting in the shadows, ready for the next lockdown. Sometimes in my dreams, I'm back in that dark hallway. The figure turns, revealing its face. I always wake up screaming before I see it clearly, but each time it gets a little closer. They say Westbrook High was built on old Native American burial grounds. Others whisper about a janitor who died in the boiler room decades ago. Whatever the truth, I know one thing for certain. During that terrifying lockdown experience, I encountered something not of this world. I've researched other creepy school lockdown stories. Some share eerily similar details. Unexplained noises, shadowy figures, the feeling of being watched. It makes me wonder how many other schools harbor dark secrets. The next time you're alone in a school after hours, pay attention. Listen closely. You might hear footsteps that aren't your own. Feel eyes upon you when no one's there. Because sometimes a lockdown traps more than just students and staff. It can awaken things best left undisturbed. I graduated last year, glad to leave Westbrook behind. But lately, I've been having dreams. I'm back in those haunted halls. Except now, I'm not running from the figure. I'm following it, drawn deeper into the school's dark heart. What's waiting for me there? Part of me never wants to know, but another part feels like I'm being called back. Like my encounter during the lockdown was just the beginning. So I'm sharing my story as a warning. To those who think school lockdowns are just about external threats, to those who dismiss creepy experiences as overactive imaginations, be careful, be aware, because sometimes the most terrifying dangers lurk within the very walls meant to keep us safe. If you ever find yourself in a school during a lockdown, stay alert. Not just for human intruders, but for things that defy explanation. Listen for whispers in empty rooms. Watch for shadows that move against the light. And if you hear slow, deliberate footsteps approaching, pray they pass you by. This is my true, scary story. A real horror story that haunts me still. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened that day, but I know this. Westbrook High holds secrets. And sometimes during a lockdown, when the halls are dark and silent, those secrets come out to play. I still drive by the school sometimes, at night, when the parking lot is empty. I sit in my car, staring at those dark windows. And I swear, just for a moment, I see a pale face staring back, waiting, inviting me to return. One day, I might accept that invitation, to find answers, to face my fears, or maybe deep down because part of me never truly left those haunted halls. Until then, I'll keep sharing my story. A warning to others. A reminder that not all lockdowns end when the all clear sounds. Some linger, leaving scars on our souls and shadows in our minds. So the next time you hear about a school lockdown, remember my tale and wonder what might be lurking in the darkness, waiting for its chance to emerge.
My name is Emily, and this happened when I was a senior in high school. I never thought I'd experience a true scary story, but that night changed everything. It was supposed to be just another late evening at school, staying behind for theater rehearsal. Little did I know I would turn into the most terrifying lockdown experience of my life. The autumn air was crisp as I walked through the empty hallways. Most students had gone home hours ago, leaving only a handful of us theater kids behind. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter around me. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life. Attention all students and staff. This is not a drill. We are initiating an immediate lockdown. I repeat, this is not a drill. The principal's voice echoed through the building, laced with an urgency I'd never heard before. My heart began to race as the reality of the situation sank in. Within seconds, the hallways plunged into darkness. Emergency red lights began to flash, bathing everything in an eerie crimson glow. The shrill sound of the lockdown siren pierced the air, its wail bouncing off the lockers and sending chills down my spine. This was real. This was happening. I ran, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. My mind raced, trying to remember the lockdown procedures we'd practiced countless times. Find a secure room, lock the doors, stay quiet, but where? The theater was too exposed with its large windows and multiple entrances. The locker room. It was nearby, windowless, and had a heavy door that locked from the inside. I sprinted towards it, my breath coming in short gasps. As I reached for the handle, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Whispers, faint but unmistakable. And they were calling my name, Emily ... The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I yanked the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. My trembling hands fumbled with the lock, finally clicking it into place. I pressed my back against the cold metal, trying to calm my racing heart. The locker room was pitch black, save for the faint red glow seeping under the door. I fumbled for my phone, using its dim light to navigate through the rows of lockers. I needed to hide, to make myself as small and invisible as possible. I crawled into a corner, wedging myself between the wall and a set of lockers. Time seemed to stand still in the darkness. I could hear my own ragged breathing, too loud in the silence. The whispers had stopped, but the absence of sound was almost worse. My mind began to play tricks on me, imagining shapes in the shadows and footsteps in the distance. Then, without warning, the locked doors began to rattle violently. It sounded as if someone or something was trying to force their way in. The metal groaned under the assault, and I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. This couldn't be happening. This had to be a nightmare, but it wasn't. As I watched in horror, a pale, ghostly hand began to slide under the gap beneath the locker room door. Its fingers were long and skeletal, scraping against the floor as they reached further into the room. I pressed myself harder against the wall, willing myself to disappear. The whispers returned louder now. Emily ... We know you're here, Emily. They seemed to come from inside my own head, a cacophony of voices all calling my name. I squeezed my eyes shut, silently praying for it all to end. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The rattling ceased. The hand withdrew. The whispers faded into nothingness. An eerie silence fell over the locker room, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in fear. It could have been minutes or hours. Time lost all meaning in the darkness. I jumped at every small sound, the settling of the building, the distant hum of machinery. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it over? Was I safe? Just as I began to relax, thinking the worst had passed, a deafening bang echoed through the room. Something had slammed against the door with incredible force, making the entire wall shudder. I bit down on my lip to keep from screaming, tasting blood. The intercom crackled to life once more. The lockdown has been lifted, all clear. I repeat, all clear. The principal's voice sounded strained, almost uncertain. Slowly, the emergency lights faded, replaced by the harsh glare of the fluorescents. I emerged from my hiding spot on shaky legs, every muscle in my body aching from being tense for so long. As I stepped into the hallway, I was met by a flurry of activity. Police officers and school security guards were everywhere, their faces grim as they spoke in hushed tones. I approached one of the officers, my voice barely above a whisper. What happened? Did they catch whoever it was? The officer looked at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. Catch who? We didn't find anyone. The alarm was triggered by a faulty sensor. There was never any intruder. But I knew what I had experienced. The whispers, the rattling doors, the pale hand, it had all been real. Hadn't it? As I walked home that night, every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every gust of wind carried whispers of my name. In the days that followed, life at school returned to normal. But for me, nothing would ever be the same. The official story was that it had been a false alarm, a technical glitch that had caused unnecessary panic. But I knew the truth. Something had been in that school that night, something that defied explanation. Even now, years later, I can't shake the memory of that terrifying lockdown experience. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, I still hear those whispers calling my name. And I wonder if whatever was in that school is still out there waiting. This creepy school lockdown story isn't just another tale to scare your friends. It's a true scary story, one that haunts me to this day. I've researched haunted schools, trying to find similar experiences, but nothing quite matches what I went through. That night, I came face to face with something beyond our understanding. Something that turned an ordinary lockdown into a real horror story. So the next time you're walking through empty school hallways after hours and you hear something that sounds like whispers, remember my story. And whatever you do, don't look under the doors. Some things are better left unseen in the shadows of a haunted school.